Welcome to my podcast, Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? With my guests, we are discussing health issues, questions you may have about your health, and debunking some of the many myths around our health. And today, it's a real pleasure to speak to Dr. Neil Stanley. And he's written a book called How to Sleep Well. And we've just been discussing before we came on, sleep is something that we all do. So hopefully it's something you'll all be very interested in. So sleep is very important to all of us, and I'm so excited. I've been wanting to talk about sleep for a long time. It's something that I've talked about a lot as a pillar of our well-being. I think it's so important for us, for our health and well-being. So Neil, today we're going to be talking about very many things. Let me tell you a little bit about Neil. He started working on sleep when he was 16. He has been working at the neuroscience division of the RAF Institute of Aviation Medicine in Farnborough. And since then, he has been involved in numerous research studies, a notable one being a study in Pakistan where the team recorded sleep in 8 people for 6 nights at 18,500 feet. You're almost in the moon there. In 1993, Neil took up a position in the Human Psychopharmacology Research Unit at the University of Surrey, where he became the Director of Sleep Research. Then he created and ran a 24-bed trial sleep laboratory, primarily doing clinical trials into the effects of medications on sleep. He has also set up and developed the sleep service at the London Clinic. Now, Neil in his book said, if he's not talking about sleep, he is writing about sleep. And if he is not writing about it, he's reading about it. And if not reading about it, he is probably asleep. So welcome, Neil.
Thank you for having me.
And your book is called How to Sleep Well, The Science of Sleeping Smarter, Living Better, and Being More Productive, which are all things I highly recommend, obviously. And as well as being evidence-based information about sleep, it's also very funny. I did laugh out loud a few times, which was always good. So tell us a little bit more about your career and your passion from the age of 16 for sleep.
Well, it was by accident, essentially. I was a relatively good student at a decidedly average comprehensive school in Farnborough. The idea was to go to sixth form, do maths, physics and chemistry, and then study chemistry at Strathclyde. That was my dream. But when I went to sixth form, I absolutely hated it. I was 16. I thought I was an adult, and they taught me like a child still. So the first week I was at sixth form, I looked in the local paper, saw there was this job that was vaguely scientific as an assistant scientific officer in the scientific civil service, working at the Institute of Aviation Medicine, an RAF station. And back in 1982, it had a 3-bed sleep lab, which worldwide was probably one of the biggest. And that's it. 42 years later, all I've ever done really is watch other people fall asleep. Which, when you say it out loud, sounds a bit creepy. But so there was no real passion. It's something that, as the old Motown song says, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. And so I'm now, behind me, you can see that there's just over 500 books about sleep, and they're just the ones I've bought in the last 3 years. My personal library of sleep books is over 3,000 books long. First book, or the earliest book I've got, is from 1547, and I probably buy 100 or so books a year about sleep, from usually early books. I'm very fascinated on the history of sleep, so it's become my all-consuming passion. And the quote you gave in your introduction is pretty true. I have very little life outside of reading, writing, or talking about sleep, so it's a passion that I've developed.
I'm very glad we're talking to you about this today. Now, in your book, you say, excuse me, you say that virtually every major disease has been linked to sleep. And you say that sleep affects our work, our school performance, our relationships, our emotional well-being, and our health. So tell us a bit more about that before we dive into the specifics.
Well, interestingly, in your introduction, you used the phrase that sleep is a pillar of our well-being. And I don't see it like that, because pillars are separate. And for me, sleep is the very foundation of good physical, mental, and emotional health. It's the basis on which we build everything up from, and that's the point of sleep. Sleep has been in the evolutionary record for about 450 million years. It's a universal phenomenon. Basically, anything with something that resembles a brain will sleep, and we even believe that organisms that don't have a brain also have a period, maybe not of sleep as we know it, but of rest. And the fact that it's persisted through all species across such a long period of time shows that it is absolutely vital. So you'll actually die of complete lack of sleep not long after you die from complete lack of water, and about 6 times quicker than you'd die from lack of food. So that just shows you how fundamentally important sleep is. And so, yes, it has been associated with increased risk of pretty much every disorder. There is no good thing about poor sleep. And we fool ourselves and we believe that we can cheat sleep, and our society is a great example of how we believe we can cheat sleep. But as I say, it is a time for repair and recuperation. Just to give you a very, very simple example, if you have one poor night's sleep tonight, tomorrow you're 4 times more likely to catch the common cold. It's as simple as that. So yes, it's not it's, as I say, I don't believe it's a column or a pillar. It is a foundation. It's what we build everything we do upon, and we injure it at our peril.
Very sound advice there. And one thing you said in your book, and I've read this in so many other books about various aspects of health, we are all very individual, and what we need to do for our sleep is going to vary from the next person. And the first question you ask in your book is, how do you feel during the day on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is that you have an irresistible desire to fall asleep, and 10, you are most awake than you have ever been. And I want to tell you some good news. I would actually put myself at 9. My friends call sleeping my superpower. I'm very, very good at sleeping, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But tell us more about how most people would rate themselves on a scale of 0 to 10.
Well, you're a very rare beast in my experience. If I'm doing a lecture, I'll ask this question of the audience. Very rarely would I ever get somebody saying a 10, maybe 1 or 2 people will say they're 9s, but most people are 6s or 7s. And that just depresses me, because we live in a society where people are trying to be healthy. They're trying to do what's right. People are eating better, they're exercising more often, they're looking after themselves. Rates of drinking, smoking, all these sorts of things have dropped. But they're not doing the one thing that will actually make them feel better. So you have people, I'll have a glass of wine with my meal, or, I'll go for a spa day, or I need a weekend away, I need to relax, I need to do this. And if they got a good night's sleep every night, they wouldn't need to do half of these things, because they would feel good. And we've rather sort of settled, shall we say, on feeling a bit rubbish each day, and we think that's probably all that we can hope for. And okay, it's raining and very windy as we record this, and it is miserable. And maybe on a late on a Wednesday afternoon, it's not the best time of life. But as I say, I think we should be asking ourselves this question: why are we going through life at less than our potential? Can you imagine if everybody was a 10 every day? It would be scary. but in a good way, I think. And I think that's the problem. We're looking for solutions to make us happier and healthier, but the one thing that is guaranteed to do that, and the one that actually we have to do whether we like it or not, is sleep, and we neglect it when we've become we have this idea that we can get by. I mean, that's what people are doing. They're getting by rather than thriving, and that seems to be such a shame.
Yes, I think it does reflect in my life that I'm a nine, because I am very, very full of energy all the time. Quite annoying, I think, to some people, but they often say to me, "How are you so energetic?" And I do think it's absolutely majorly related to how much I sleep. And I found in your book, you said something really interesting about how our lives now are so full of information, data. When I was young, our lives were much simpler, and we might have watched the odd thing on TV, but we spent a lot of time with a less busy life. And now we're saturated by the amount of information that we take in on a daily basis, and how this can increase our stress, and how when we sleep, we're going to talk about how we sleep and why we sleep in a moment. But sleep is so important to process information. So how do you feel about modern society and the needs, the importance of sleep?
Well, one of the questions that you as a sleep expert always gets asked is, why do we sleep? And the answer is, we really don't know. We know what happens during sleep, but we don't know why we have to do it for 8 hours a night, or roughly 8 hours a night every single night. But one of the things we do know that is vitally important about sleep is it's the time that you process information and you lay down memories. So essentially what's happening is everything about today that you experience, you'll keep in your mind until tonight, until your deep sleep, and then you'll sort the information out. Some of the information you receive today is unimportant, so you can get rid of it, but other is important, and you need to, one, recognize it's important, two, decide to keep it, three, put it somewhere where you know where you've put it, because there's no point having information if you can't retrieve it. But more importantly, during the sleep, it's the time that you connect that new piece of information with all the pre-existing information that you already have. And as you say, in the past, and it's not too distant a past, you would be born in a village and you would not move more than 5 miles from that village for the vast majority of your life. And so life was simple. You recognized nature. You knew when the sun come up and when it went down, and you knew when the summer solstice and when you planted the crops. But it was all very simple information. And now, I mean, there's the great statistic that 95% of all information that has ever been created was created in the last 3 years. Because if you think about it, when I was young, you went on holiday and you had 3 rolls of film that took 24 exposures, and that was it. Now you take thousands of photographs. And there was a startling examination in the New York Times. The New York Times on Sunday in the US is a huge, thick, book-sized newspaper, and it was reckoned that there's more information in one edition of the New York Times on Sunday than somebody 150 years ago had to learn an entire lifetime. So we need sleep more than we have ever done, if not just for its information processing. Whatever else sleep does for us, sleep is more important now to deal with this barrage of information. And of course, if we don't deal with that information, that leads to what we call stress, the inability to cope and to function correctly in the world that we live in. And that, I think, is the problem that we're faced. We are bombarded with information in a way that we never have been before. And so, as I say, whatever sleep is about, we should be really optimizing sleep now in this day and age.
Great advice. And the $1,000,000 question, how much sleep should we get? And in your book, you said that the 8 hours a night is a myth. Tell us more.
It is a myth, and it has always been a myth. Nobody in the last 600 years has ever advocated 8 hours a night. So, as I say, I've read extensively, as much as I possibly can on this issue, and I can find no reason why it became this totemic idea that we all need 8 hours. It just doesn't exist in the literature. Back to Andrew Board back in 1547, he basically says the time needed to sleep is between 6 and 9 hours, which is exactly what the latest recommendations from the scientific bodies in America say, 6 to 9 hours. 8 hours is an average. It is not an ideal. The thing about sleep need is we are individual, and in a way it's like shoe size or height. It's genetically determined, so it's about getting the right amount of sleep for you as an individual. So how much is that? Well, anywhere between 4 and 10 hours. There are some people, very, very few, but they do exist, who can absolutely thrive on 4 hours sleep. There are other people who need to have 11 hours sleep to thrive. I personally know that I need 9.5 hours sleep a night to feel at my best. And if I were to only get 8 hours sleep, I'd actually feel pretty ropey. So sleep deprivation is classed as 1 hour less sleep than you need as an individual. So how much sleep do you as an individual need? Well, essentially, it's the amount that allows you to feel awake, alert, and focused during the day, going back to the question you asked earlier about whether you're a 0 or a 10. If you feel awake, alert, focused during the day, you've had enough sleep. Doesn't matter how much sleep you've had enough. If you say you feel tired during the day, well, that actually tells me nothing. Tired is what I like to call having a bit of a rubbish life. Tired is to do with, it's dull and miserable. I didn't win the 62 million on the Euro Millions on Tuesday, so, I'm probably going to have to carry on working for the rest of my life. It's just, life's just not great, but that doesn't tell us anything about your sleep. If you have a problem with your sleep, you will be sleepy. And some people will say, well, what's the difference between being tired and being sleepy? It's very simple. If you walk up 3 flights of stairs, when you get to the top, do you need a sit down or do you need a sleep? If you need a sit down, you're tired, fatigued, knackered, exhausted. If you need a sleep, you are sleepy. And I think we often confuse the two things. So we just put the way we feel down to life, rather than looking at the actual cause of it, which is probably that we're not getting the sleep we need.
So I wanted to talk now about sleep environments. And many years ago, I realised that in my bedroom, I had my desk, I had a notice board with all the things I needed to do the next day. I often, before I went to sleep, the last thing I saw was my laptop. And then I was reading some things about our environment, and I realised I needed to change that. So now I'm lucky in my house. I just, in my bedroom, have my bed. It's got my bed, sometimes some cats, but it's got my bed. And so our bedtime routine, I personally, we eat very early. I've got kids, so they like eating. They're always hungry, so we eat at about 6. I often do some more work. If I'm not going out, I often fall asleep in front of the TV. Might be as early as 9, but then I go up to bed about 10:30, and I sleep, and I don't have an alarm. I think that's one of my helps in my sleep, that I don't have I hardly ever have an alarm. So I think that grating noise of an alarm. But nowadays we do sleep with our phones in our room, and I did try to stop doing that, but I have been doing some online meditations. And if I ever find a bit of trouble getting to sleep, or if I am waking up about 5 quite often, I put on a meditation or a bedtime story, and I'm asleep within seconds. So I think obviously social media has been a bit of a problem, having those gadgets in our rooms. So what do you think about sleep habits, and what would you advise people about when they go to bed?
Well, with regards to the bedroom, essentially you need it to be a sanctuary for sleep. It needs to be the place you go to sleep and only to sleep. So by going into the bedroom, you are saying, or getting into the bed, you're saying, this is it, I am going to sleep. Therefore, there should be no wake behavior or wake associated behavior when you are in your bedroom. So no phones or whatever. I remember when I first started, as say back in 1982, there was the advice in the few sleep books that were around of not having a television in your bedroom. And this amazed me because we had one TV in the corner of the living room from Radio Rentals. The fact that people could afford two TVs was just bizarre. But we even had that advice then, not because of the blue light and all of this sort of nonsense, which has been the blue light story. 15 years old, not true anymore. But it was just like, if you've just watched The Exorcist, you're not going to get a good night's sleep. It's got nothing to do with blue light. It's got to do with stimulation of the brain. So the bedroom should be dark, quiet, cool, and comfortable. So darkness is the signal for sleep. Light is the signal to be awake. So if you have light, and even very small amounts of light can be disturbing of your sleep. Light at night is bad for you. There was a study a few years ago that showed that if at midnight you can stand with your back to one wall of your bedroom and see the opposite wall, then that level of light at night is significantly related to increased risk of breast cancer. And that's
Wow.
scary. That's not just the bedroom should be a bit dark, it is your bedroom should be dark. So heavy curtains, blackout blinds, eye masks, whatever to get the room dark. Quiet, the World Health Organization says 35 decibels, background with intermittent peaks of 45 decibels. Now, nobody talks in decibels. It's completely pointless advice. 35 decibels is a quiet conversation in a library. 45 decibels is an articulated lorry going past your window. Your average snorer, 65 to 95 decibels. So they are going to disturb your sleep. So your bedroom needs to be quiet. So earplugs or separate beds, separate bedrooms. Cool. In order to get a good night's sleep, you need to lose 1 degree of body temperature. You lose that body temperature out of your head and face because that's the bit that sticks out from under your duvet. So the room needs to be cool. The bed needs to be warm, needs to be thermoneutral, essentially 29, 30 degrees. But you heat the bed up just by being it. You're just big one cuddly hot water bottle. But the room, you need to have that temperature gradient. So even in winter, you shouldn't be heating the room. You should be heating the bed where you are and have that gradient. If the room is too cold, and in this time of austerity and crazy electricity bills, wear a nightcap. It's green, efficient, costs very, very little. Wear a nightcap. If it's very cold, wear bed socks. If it's freezing cold, also wear gloves. Much, much better than trying to heat the room. And then comfortable. If you live to the age of 70, you'll spend 220,000 hours of your life in bed. You'll actually spend more time in bed than you'll spend in any one other position in your life. And yet you think that you can pay 99 quid for a mattress from a man in a white van. Now, I'm not saying that you have to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on a bed, or even thousands of pounds on the bed, but you should think about buying a comfortable bed. And the only way you can buy a comfortable bed is to get on the bed and try it out. You can't buy a bed off the internet. It's impossible to get the right bed off the internet. So try it out. So that's the bedroom. And then there's two other things you need. One is a relaxed body, but you know that you can be absolutely physically exhausted and not fall asleep. So the thing that is an absolute prerequisite for sleep is a quiet mind. And that's the bit that we fail at. If you are taking your cares and worries to bed with you, they are going to play on your mind, your mind's going to race, and you are not going to be able to fall asleep. So that quiet mind. And essentially, It's just about having a wind down, having a routine, doing something nice for 45 minutes or so before you get into bed, putting your cares and worries to one side and doing something relaxing and nice, whatever that may be. I read every night before bed, regardless of what time I get home. I read maybe a paragraph, maybe an entire book, but I will read. But that might not be for you. Listening to music, doing yoga, mindfulness, meditation, whatever works for you will help you sleep. But it's that bit that we're missing. Most people's bedtime routine is to switch the telly off, have a pee, brush their teeth, flop into bed saying, "Sleep, take me," and being slightly disappointed that sleep isn't doing that. You can't force sleep. You can't encourage sleep. You have to let sleep happen. And you have to therefore put your mind and body in the position to allow sleep to happen. And I'm not going to say it's as simple as that, but we need to think about, the way we live our lives and how that may be impacting on our sleep.
I think for me, what my superpower is, even though I might have just been working 5 minutes before, once I decide I'm not going to work anymore and I sit down, literally my kids will tell you I fall asleep within seconds. They think it's really quite bizarre, but I can amazingly switch my brain off, and I think that's my superpower. I'm going to take you up on the blue light.
Yeah.
The blue light. So
Yes.
that's controversial. So tell us more about that, because we hear that all the time. Is that a myth? You're saying it's a myth?
You hear it all the time because people want to sell you a solution to a problem they've created. It's not a myth, but it is something that's been disproven. The idea was that 20 years or so ago, receptors that aren't image forming were found in the eye. So they're not part of the visual thing, but they are part of running our circadian rhythm. And they respond to blue light, 460 to 485 nanometers, blue light. So light in that blue spectrum is a signal to be awake, and when that blue light disappears, that's a signal for going to sleep. And as the sunsets are red. They're not blue, they're red, or the enemy of sleep, and that you had to strip out blue light. But then we found out that it's not blue light, it's any light at night. So even a Kindle Paperwhite will disturb your sleep. So it's any light will, whether it's red, green, or whatever, will disturb your sleep. So it's not blue light. Stripping blue light out of your screen actually just makes the screen look muddy and dull. And so you switch the brightness up, and it's the brightness of the light which is important. And also there was a study from Scandinavia a couple of years ago that actually shows that your light is that you have a daily need for light. So if you work outside under a bright blue sky, actually using a device at night has no effect on you at all. So the idea that you have to strip blue light is not true. Any light. And the other thing is that our sensitivity to light is hugely different. So for some people, the amount of light from a single candle could disrupt their sleep. For others, it would be sort of the light that you're sitting in now with just a sort of a desk lamp and that sort of thing. That level of light would be needed to disturb sleep. So we are again going back to what we were saying about being individuals. It's your sensitivity to light that's important, not the color of the light. And as I said, with looking at social media or looking at your tablet or your thing, it's not the light that's the problem. It's what you're doing. It's what you're watching, that dopamine hit of going through TikTok or whatever, or watching, some horrific video of whatever's happened in the Middle East or whatever. This is what's causing you to have an unquiet mind, not necessarily the light from your device. I mean, to be honest, to say I'm been doing this for 42 years. I look at my phone before I go to sleep. So the last thing I do is just scroll through Twitter, Facebook, check I've got some emails, look at the BBC News. And if I wake up in the middle of the night to pee as a 58-year-old man, that's what you do, I will again check. And it has no effect on me because, I'm awake. And it's not going to make me more awake because I've already woken up. So I have no problem with phones. But as I say, I'm 58 and I'm sensible with the use. Other people are not sensible with the use of their phones and will, unless you take it away from them, scroll all night. And a few years ago, the streaming service Netflix reduced the amount of time between episodes deliberately, so you don't have enough time to consider not watching the next episode because it's already started. And the CEO of Netflix actually said, "My biggest enemy is sleep. My biggest competitor is sleep." So yes, if you abuse screens, then they will disturb your sleep. But as I say, it's not the biggest problem in the world. And as I say, the problem with sleep is it's been monetized. People want to sell you a solution. There's a lot of money to be made in sleep. Not by people like me, because I haven't got the brass neck to flog you something that doesn't work. And common sense has never made you a fortune, which is a problem. But it's been monetized. And so you will, magnesium supplementation. Everybody's going on about, take magnesium to help you sleep. It will do absolutely nothing at all, except make money for people who sell you magnesium, etc., etc., etc.
Thank you. I love busting myths. And I now feel a bit better about using my phone in bed, so I'm not going to feel so guilty. But I think your advice is don't watch news at 10. That's going to make your mind.
Exactly.
So we won't do that anymore. Thinking a bit more about lifestyle and individuality. Alcohol and coffee. So I've actually never drunk a cup of coffee in my life. But I'm very aware that I've got, when we're at dinner, there'll be some of the table at an evening dinner that will say, "Oh no, I can't have coffee past 10 o'clock in the morning, midday, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock." And there's some that can drink a cup of coffee and be totally fine. And alcohol, I think, is the same. So I personally think that certainly we'll come on to women and things in a minute, but for many women going through the perimenopause, I think drinking even one glass of wine might have an effect, but at other times of their life it might not. So how do you feel about advice to people about alcohol and coffee?
Well, again, as you said, it is very, very individual. Our sensitivity to caffeine is massively, massively wide. And as you say, there are some people who should perhaps not use caffeine at all. And there are others who can have 2 double espressos before bed and sleep perfectly well. So if you have had 2 double espressos every night for the last 40 years and you've never had a sleep problem and you develop a sleep problem, it's almost certainly not the caffeine that's causing the problem. Something else has changed. So we just need to be sensible about it. Caffeine hangs around in the body for a long time, 5 to 10 hours is the half-life of caffeine. So for some people, having a coffee at lunchtime or 2 o'clock, you get that hit of caffeine. But the thing is, the amount of caffeine to give you the hit during the day is a lot more than the amount of caffeine needed to disturb your sleep at night. And so that's the problem, that even though you've had a long period of time between the cup of coffee and going to sleep, it can still affect you. But it's about finding what's right for you. But I have a friend who I meet every once in a while. She's also in the sleep field, and we sometimes have dinner together, and we'll have a nice 3-course meal, a couple of glasses of wine, and then she'll say, "I'll have decaf." And you think, well, you've just had a big meal and a couple of glasses of wine. The anxiety about decaf is much more than the caffeine would disturb you. With regards to alcohol, again, sensitivity is different. Alcohol has, since it was invented 9,000 years ago in Babylonia, was used as a sleep aid. It's the most widely used sleep aid that there is. and it works on the same receptors as sleeping tablets, so it is actually good for putting you to sleep. The problem with alcohol is that when it leaves the system, and so there are three issues with alcohol, and one of which pertains very much to the women you described. So one is it makes you pee. It's a diuretic, so it makes you pee. So you wake up and you have a pee. Two, it gives you that horrible headache because it's just shrinking the brain and that's pulling on the meninges, which gives you that headache. And the final one, which is the one that people don't really latch onto, is the fact that it's calorific. I said earlier you need to lose 1 degree of body temperature to get a good night's sleep. If you drink too much, you have to burn off those calories. And burning off the calories causes heat, which makes your sleep fragmented. And this, of course, is particularly worrisome in women going through the menopause because their temperature control is shot to pieces. They have the hot flushes, and so alcohol just adds to that. So one of the pieces of advice that you give to women going through the menopause is don't do anything before bed that increases your body temperature further than it's already being increased by the symptoms. And so alcohol in that regard is causing that issue with temperature. And for women in the menopause, temperature is probably around 90% of the reason why they have disturbed sleep. It's almost exclusively the fluctuations in the temperature and the inability to cool down at night is the cause of poor sleep.
And my menopause friends would say that they think in many cases, the symptoms that women are seeing during the day are exacerbated by the fact that they've had poor sleep. So their irritability, brain fog, hot flushes during the day, and many of the other issues that they can have. If they haven't slept well, everything's going to be compounded and they're going to feel much worse. So
Exactly.
The sleep's just
I mean, it's a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle, and that's the problem. That, as you say, it's very easy to say, but if you have poor sleep, you will be more irritable. You will have more arguments with your partner. You will have less empathy with your partner. You'll actually have less desire to make up the argument. And even in extremists, there is a link between poor sleep and domestic violence, increased levels of domestic violence. So yes, people very conveniently, both in teenagers and menopausal women, they use the same excuse. It's their hormones, which means nothing at all. It's nonsense. But the two, we know that if you have poor sleep, there's a direct correlation between quality sleep and the amount of pain you feel. The worse you sleep, the more pain you feel. We know there's a direct correlation between the amount of sleep you get or the quality of your sleep and the amount of sugar you consume. So the more sleep you are, the more you crave sugary and fatty foods. Get a better night's sleep and you won't have those cravings. So if you're trying to diet or maintain a healthy weight, get a good night's sleep. That's the first thing you should do, because then you won't have those cravings. A particular weight loss organization calls them sins. Well, if you remove the temptation, you're not going to sin. We're getting biblical here. I don't intend to. But if you don't crave sugar and fat, you won't eat sugar and fat. So this is what I said earlier about it being the foundation. If you are going through any type of situation, whether physical, mental, or emotional, sleep is the thing you need to do. You mentioned a few questions ago about cats getting on your bed. If a cat gets ill, what does it do? If you don't take it to the vet, a cat just hides somewhere for 5 days, magically heals itself for free, and then comes back. But we don't do that. You have these adverts on telly about powering through. I've taken such and such a drug and I've got man flu and I'm going to power through. Why? Just go to bed for a day. we've lost this common sense. And so, we are, sleep is just so fundamental to cope. I mean, talking, using something from pain, you often hear pain patients say, if only I could sleep well, I could deal with my pain. And yet they get treated as pain patients, not as somebody who needs to improve their sleep. And that's where we're missing it. Sleep is, I'm not saying the answer to all problems, but of great many of the problems that we have, sleep would be fundamental to that.
I do sleep well, but I do still crave sugar. So I'm afraid I'm the exception here. That
Well,
hasn't
no,
worked for me. I wish it
sugar's
had.
nice,
Oh, I
but
wish.
it's the level, the amount that you eat. And I say there's a 33% increased desire for sugary and fatty foods, and an 18% increase in something called leptin, which is the hormone that tells you you're full. So when you're sleepy, you want to eat junk. You eat junk and you don't stop eating junk. So as I say, women who have poor sleep, year on year, put on half a BMI point. This was a Swiss study over 14 years. So there is a direct link. And as I say, getting a better night's sleep will actually reduce your sugar intake without you having to do anything else.
You don't have to sell this to me. I'm definitely a big advocate of sleep. So let's go back to babies. And you had a really good, interesting section about the way we think about our baby sleeping, and it's like you said, it's like a competition to see, new parents to see whose child's going to be the first baby to sleep through the night, and I never agreed with that when my kids were babies, and mine slept when they slept, and we co-slept, and I was never one of these people who wrap their babies up, put them in a separate room, and let them cry themselves to sleep night after night. I thought that was child abuse, really. So, what advice would you give to new parents with babies?
Well, basically, that they're going to be a problem because a newborn has absolutely no idea the difference between day or night, or that mummy and daddy have to go to work. They have no idea of that. And as you say, they will sleep when they want to because they have no circadian rhythm at this point. They will sleep at any point for any period of time they like. And so all you can do with a child is to allow it the freedom to have the sleep it needs. And a newborn needs 16 to 20 hours sleep. A 10-year-old needs approximately 10 hours sleep. Until a child is 4 years old, it should be having 2 long daytime naps every day. Until a child is 6, it should be having at least 1 long daytime nap. We don't do that. If you go to Finland or Russia, places like that, they have cots in their infant schools, where the kids will have an afternoon nap every day. They will have a long afternoon nap. We fill our children's life up with absolute rubbish, rather than allowing them to sleep. Oh, they've got football this week, this day, swimming the next day, Cubs the next day. They do this, they do that. Got to keep them busy. Got to keep them. No, you don't. Just let the poor souls go to sleep and get sleep. But it has become a competitive sport, and it is a badge of my child's better than your child because it sleeps through the night.
Yeah,
Whoopee-doo. Well done. Aren't you clever? You had nothing to do with that at all. The child just happens to be a child that has developed that ability earlier. But we should allow your granny would have told you never wake a sleeping child. If a child's asleep, you should never wake it because I mentioned memory. You learn during the night. You learn new skills during the night. But also, critically, deep sleep is the only time that you physically grow. You only ever grow when you're asleep. So we're mucking about with fundamental processes that the children need to go through. Yes, children are a problem, but as you say, this idea of children only cry for a couple of reasons: because they're hungry, they're in pain, they're scared, or because they want to annoy you. Now, I'm not a mother and I've never had children, but I damned if I believe that anybody can tell the difference between those cries. And to so refuse, if you were sat on your couch at home and you were crying and your partner just left you there and ignored you, you would be rightly annoyed with them. And yet for children, oh no, let's just ignore it. It will self-soothe. It will settle. No, it won't. It'll just learn that you are a hard-hearted person who doesn't care about it, so it won't cry out anymore. So, yes, co-sleeping. Co-sleeping's been demonized, and it's only ever been demonized in the Anglo-Saxon world. So America, UK, Canada. People say, oh, if you sleep with your child, you'll get cot death. The Japanese sleep with their children, and they have the lowest rate of cot death in the developed world. The prohibition against sleeping only applies to you if you are obese, alcoholic smoker sleeping on the settee with your baby. If you're not anybody like that, then the child wants to be with the mother. The mother is good. She's nice and soft and cuddly, and she provides food. It's brilliant. That's what mothers have been designed for. They are good at it. Men can't, at the moment, do that. So we're not much use at it. So children want to sleep with their mother because everybody can only sleep if they're safe and secure. So instead of having mother listening to her breathing, listening to her heartbeat, and the mother listening to the child's heartbeat and the child's breathing, we replace mother with a glow-in-the-dark Teletubby. If you were to wake up in the middle of the night seeing glow-in-the-dark animals circling over your head, you would be petrified. But we think that's a replacement for mother. It is crazy what we do. And the only reason that we have put children into another bedroom is it happened in the late Victorian era when Victorian men wanted to have more sex with their wives. So they kicked the child out of the bed and installed themselves into the bed, which is why you treat your partner as though they are a child. Yeah, you're listening out for them in the same way you would listen out for the child. And of course, you can't get a good night's sleep because you're listening out for a child who's 20 yards away, because you can't hear it breathe. You can't hear its heartbeat. So how the hell do you know that it's still alive when you wake up in the middle of the night? You don't. So, there's this whole mythology that has been built around making women feel guilty about, wanting. I mean, I do a lot of lectures to healthcare professionals, and a lot of my audience is of GPs, young female GPs from the Indian subcontinent, and they come up and they sort of whisper to me, is it okay to co-sleep? And I say, yes. They go, oh, because in the countries they come from, it is absolutely normal to do that. Whereas we have demonized this loving, bonding relationship with children. And I say, and we have replaced that with a glow-in-the-dark Teletubby, which to me seems horrific. So, yeah. Probably haven't made myself very popular saying any of that, but who cares?
No, I totally agree with you, and I did all of that. I ignored all this propaganda that was around at the time when mine was small, that they should have a nap at this time and you should wake them up at this time. I never woke my kid. I think that was crazy to ever wake your kids up. They're asleep. Leave them till they wake up. And as I said,
they're quiet. They're not doing anything.
enjoy it. And as I said, I'm someone that doesn't use an alarm. I just go with my body, and I went with their rhythms as well. But now they're teenagers. They're all here at the moment because it's half term. One of them was actually napping on the sofa when we started, but he's just sort of risen from the dead. So teenagers, they do go a little bit nocturnal, and mine were in lockdown, just when they were really, really going through puberty and beyond. And so I did let them just get their own rhythm to sleep. So what advice would you give someone with teenage kids about their sleep? And as you said, it's an important time to grow and for their brains to sort of calm down and reset. So what about teenagers and getting enough sleep?
Okay, well, the thing that happens with teenagers, and we don't actually know why, is that they do need to go to bed later. There is a shift in their circadian rhythm. As I say, we're not sure why, because if you look at anything, there has to be an evolutionary benefit to it. And why teenagers would need to go to bed later doesn't seem to make any sense, but they do. The thing is, the shift is only approximately 2 hours. So what that probably means is your teenager is probably going to want to go to bed later than you do. And one of the things that parents do is, oh no, we're the parents, you're the child, you go to bed before we do, because that's the way it is. Well, it might not work that way. They might go to their bedroom, but they certainly won't be able to fall asleep. But it also means that they want to get up later. So your average teenager should be going to bed around 11:30 and sleeping between 9 and 9.5 hours. Which means, of course, that they're not going to be able to get up at 7 o'clock. Their natural tendency is to want to get up around 9, 8:30, 9:30. And so that's why teenagers find it difficult to start in the morning, but also, as I say, they need to go to bed later. So if a teenager says, I can't get out of bed at 9 o'clock in the morning, they might be telling you the truth. But a teenager who says they cannot get out of bed until 2 o'clock in the afternoon is unfortunately merely lazy. There is no physiological reason for that at all. But the problem, as I say, that they face is that school start times in England or in UK are not too stupid compared to American school start times. But they are not necessarily the start time of the school, but the travel to the school. I mean, I frequently get early trains into London and that, and you see children, teenagers on the train at sort of 7 o'clock, meaning they must have gotten up at 6 o'clock or whatever in the morning to get ready. So they're not fitted to the 9 to 5 world that we push them into. And there is no reason why we shouldn't start school later to allow teenagers to get up at their biologically correct time and make it into school. That would help their academic performance massively. It's thought that delaying start times in America increases people's grades by at least 1 to 1.5 points on your standard scales of exams. So again, there is nobody on earth who can tell you why schools start early. And people are surprised as to why schools end at 3 o'clock. People say, it's for the teachers to do marking and things like that. It's not. It's the only reason schools finish at 3 o'clock is in the olden days you had to go home from school and do some useful work on the farm. So that's why it finishes early. So there's no fundamental reason why schools can change. But yes, teenagers need sleep. Again, this is why they have this huge need for sleep, because their brains are transitioning from being children's brains to being adult brains. I mean, sleep is all about processing new information, but it's also about processing emotions. And so teenagers become sort of emotionally mature, shall we say, not brain-wise, not action-wise, but they become emotionally sentient beings, and they need the time to process it. And again, all the things that we ascribe to teenagers' hormones, their moodiness, their miserableness, their lack of motivation to do anything, has got nothing to do with hormones. It's got everything to do with their sleep. Let's be honest, teenagers were only invented in the 50s and 60s. They didn't exist before then. You were just a young adult and you were treated as such. So there's nothing unique about a teenager's hormonal pattern, but there is something different in terms of sleep, and that's the problem. I'm not saying that if you've got every teenager a good night's sleep, they'd suddenly turn into lovable creatures, but it wouldn't be a bad thing to start with.
Mine aren't too bad; they're quite lovable. But I wanted I wanted to take up what you said about people being asleep on the train. So I don't normally get the train to London till 9:10, and everyone's quite awake. But every so often, I do get the earlier train. If you get the 7 o'clock train, they're all asleep. I've posted about this before on social media. I mean, this is a terrible way to start the day. If you've got up, had a shower, had some breakfast, got on the train, and fallen asleep at 7 a.m., what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. I say this is the issue that we have. That we have the 9 to 5 working day, but it is never 9 to 5. There is the commuting. I mean, so I live in Farnborough, south of London, so it is a commuter town, and you see these people, as you say, they get to the platform 1 second before the train arrives.
That's
They
me.
stand in exactly the same place. They sit in exactly the same seat and literally will fall asleep the minute they get on it. And then you see them again at the other end of the day at 6:30, getting the train back. And this is the issue that we used to live and work in the same place. There wasn't this commuting and that sort of thing. And again, it's eating into sleep because we think that sleep is pliable, that it will make it up at the weekend. But you can't make up sleep at the weekend. That's not good for you, and it doesn't work. So it is a problem. We as I say, we've extended the day because we have artificial light and central heating. We've extended the day into the night, whereas in the not too dim and distant past, people always say the thing that changed the world was Edison and his light bulb. It wasn't, because we've had fire for 450,000 years. We have illuminated, the monks of Lindisfarne wrote their manuscripts by candlelight. We've always had light that allows us to see at night, but what we didn't have was cheap fuel. And it was the coming of central heating that allowed us to colonize the night. Because in the past, you had to decide to put the last log or piece of coal on the fire. Now, you just put the heating on. It's not an issue. It's not a problem. And so that's the problem. It's been a very modern phenomenon that we commute long distances. We get up. We don't have an hour lunch break. We eat our sandwiches in front of our computer. All of these things are messing with that sort of natural rhythmicity of our lives. But I mean, there's a absolutely true but very funny story about people sleeping on trains. From Waterloo to Farnborough, you have to go through Woking. And this was in the days of the slam door trains where you could open the door and just step out. And one day, a guy who always got off at Woking, so he woke up as it pulled into Woking. He woke up, the train had pulled into the opposite platform. So he automatically opened the door, stepped out and fell out the train, which he was fine and that, slightly embarrassed, but people have they become absolutely robotic about their lives, and that again doesn't sound like quality of life, which we're all struggling to achieve.
Yes, and another myth that you broke in your book, many myths for me that I was reading. We sleep less as we age. It's something that, again, people always say, but you said it's a myth. Tell us more.
It is, and again, where this comes from, no idea why this has become such an ideal. what happens, there's a couple of things that happen as you get older. One is that you may start wanting to go to sleep earlier and therefore wake up earlier. That might cause you to think you have a sleep problem because you've woken up early, but you might shift wanting to go to bed a bit earlier. But the main difference as we get older is not that we reduce the amount of time asleep, it's that we lose our deep sleep, our deep restorative sleep, so-called N3 sleep. And we progressively lose that as we get older. And this has two consequences. One, N3 sleep, deep sleep, is the bit of sleep that makes you think like you've had a good night's sleep. So it's the restful, recuperative part of sleep. So if you don't have as much of it, you wake up and you don't feel as refreshed as you perhaps used to. And so that might lead you to believe you have a sleep problem because, when you were 20, you slept for 8 hours, you woke up and you felt brilliant. Now you're 60, you sleep for 8 hours and you wake up and you think, so what? And it's common, therefore, for people to think, well, I need more sleep. I'm missing out on something. So if I have just another hour's sleep, I'll be fine. I'll get that missing thing. But that's a bit like trying to get drunk on shandy. You can have 8 pints of shandy and you won't get drunk. Having a 9th pint of shandy isn't going to make any difference. The other thing about this loss of slow wave sleep is it's the thing that drives your need for sleep. It's the pressure to keep you asleep. So babies, for instance, have huge amounts of slow wave sleep. Memory, learning, growth all happens during deep sleep, so they need a lot of it. As we get to being an adult, it makes up about 25% of the night. So if you don't have as much deep sleep, you're more easily woken. And once you are awake, there is less physiological pressure to put you back to sleep. So again, there is also this thing that the elderly do is, well, what can I expect? I'm 75 years old, bits of me are falling off, other bits are hurting. How can I expect to have a good night's sleep? Well, yes, there are some natural changes, which I've just mentioned, that can cause you to sleep worse, but there are plenty of other things that are fixable. If you get up and pee more than twice a night, you need to have that fixed. It can be fixed. If you have sleep apnea or snoring or you're in pain, these can be fixed. So don't just accept poor sleep just as a consequence of getting older. Now, there is a sex difference in this loss of slow wave sleep. Men start losing their slow wave sleep a lot earlier than women. Men from around the age of 35 or so, women from around the age of 55 or so. So over the age of 60, men against age-matched controls have worse sleep because they've been declining longer. So a man over the age of 70 will probably have hardly any of that deep sleep at all. So that's what changes. So you need the same amount of sleep. You're just going to find it a lot harder to get that sleep that you need.
I wanted to finish off talking about tech and sleep problems. So I do snore. I mean, I'm normally sleeping alone, so it doesn't really matter. But I've seen gadgets for snoring, gadgets to help you sleep, sleeping pills, and there's these wearables that now people are wearing. And you've talked about this a lot in your book. People are wearing it, and one of my friends was becoming obsessive by it, and I saw them yesterday and said, "Oh, I was interviewing you," and he said, "Yeah, I've decided it doesn't work." And I said, "No, that's what Neil said." So what would you advice would you give to people that are becoming obsessive with all these new tech or potions and lotions that they say are going to help with sleep?
As I said, it's becoming a monetized condition. People see sleep as important, but because of that, they can guilt you into paying money for, there's a robot that you clutch to your chest that breathes and you breathe with it. It's over £600
God.
for this device. And it's the size of a pillow, and it's hard plastic. So once you've fallen asleep, I don't know what you do with it when you turn over on it in the middle of the night or kick it onto the floor. But yes, it's just been identified, as I say, as a way of making money. The National Institute of Clinical Excellence, NICE, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, the European Sleep Research Society, all say that cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is what you should do. So behavioral intervention. We talked about, making the bedroom nice. We talked about quieting the mind. These are things that cost no money at all. You can do them yourself. So tech is just to say, people are, we've talked about the blue glasses. People are, even though the science says they don't work, and there's good science that says it doesn't work, they're still selling it. People who claim to be sleep experts are still selling you a device that they know does not work. And then, as you say, this observed self, the wearable. You've got people going to their doctor saying, Doctor, I've got insomnia. Why? How do you feel? Oh, well, my Fitbit's told me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how do you feel? No, my Fitbit's told me. Well, your Fitbit's rubbish, as with every other sleep wearable. They are not capable of measuring anything other than the amount of time you're asleep. They can't measure light sleep, deep sleep, or REM sleep, dreaming sleep. They can't measure that. I've heard people come to me and say, "I've got 40% deep sleep," and I said, "That's not possible. That's physiologically impossible unless you had absolutely no sleep last night, or the night before. No, I slept fine the night before, but I have 40%. How can I reduce it? Or I don't have enough REM sleep. What can I do about it? Well, all you can do about it is get the sleep you need. The brain is self-regulating. It can, if you give the body the sleep it needs, it will get the stages of sleep that it needs. But, and this will come to the head. And I confidently predict this will happen. And I do hope I'm involved in it as the expert witness, because what will happen is somebody will drive from London to Glasgow, have an accident, and say, but my device told me I was all right to drive. And that's when the whole thing will come tumbling down. And I won't mention them, but a certain manufacturer of a certain type of device has been sued twice in America successfully for overclaiming what their devices can do with regards to sleep. So, but as I say, there was there's two papers published back in 1916 in New York by a guy called um, what was his name? James Walsh, who was the GP in New York. And it said they're both called insomnia as dread. And he said the biggest cause of insomnia is reading that you'll die or go mad if you don't get a good night's sleep. Now, the biggest selling sleep book ever, published 5 or 6 years ago, which I won't name because he's sold enough of them, basically spends 500 pages telling you you'll die or go mad if you don't get a good night's sleep. The problem is that's nonsense. Nobody has ever died of lack of sleep. The link, everybody says, oh, there's a link between poor sleep and dementia. Well, it actually might be completely the opposite way round. It might be that poor sleep is the first sign of dementia that we can recognize long before the cognitive decline. So it might be completely opposite, but it's enough to cause you to panic. It's enough, therefore, to buy a solution for your problem, rather than taking responsibility for your own sleep and switching the blooming telly off at a sensible time. We need an alarm from Netflix to tell us that we've been watching Netflix too long. You're an adult. Look at the clock. If it says 11 o'clock, you should probably be going to bed. You don't need an alarm to tell you that. You don't need to do anything. Then they say, read a book, listen to some music. It's not difficult. We just refuse to do it. And just think that we can force sleep to happen just by lying in bed, that sleep will happen. Well, no, it won't. A good friend of mine professor of gerontology, well, emeritus professor of gerontology at Loughborough, Kevin Morgan. He said, falling asleep is like falling in love. He said, you have to woo it. He said, the harder you chase the object of your affection, the more you will chase it away. And he said, you have to woo sleep. And I just think that's what we've forgotten. And the other thing we've forgotten completely is it's a pleasure. There's nothing better than a good night's sleep. Certainly nothing cheaper than a good night's sleep. And we've forgotten how good we can feel after a good night's sleep. And we try to replace that with God knows what else to make us feel good rather than getting a good night's sleep.
I love sleeping. I definitely do. And just to pick up what you said, I just feel with this health tech in so many areas in my field, for sure, it's not empowerment at all. It's exploitation. And, we've got to stop stressing people out with all these gadgets and things. It's just gone crazy. Now, in your book, you've got so much more. We've really just skimmed the surface. So if you're interested in this topic, please read Neil's great book. And you've got a whole section at the end that I absolutely love, with so many myths that you broke. I absolutely loved it. But I want to move now, just briefly at the end, onto your new book coming out on the 24th of February called Sleep Divorce: How to Sleep Apart, Not Fall Apart. Would you like to just tell us the bottom line?
Well, this is again a part of the myth busting, because we've been sold this idea that you should share a bed with another person, which is completely unnatural. Humans are the only animals that sleep together for intimacy. Other animals may sleep together for warmth or for protection, but we choose to do it. But as I mentioned earlier, your average snorer, 65 to 95 decibels. I published probably the first paper about couples sleep about 20 years ago now, showing that much of your sleep disturbance is caused by your bed partner. They move, they kick, they punch, they fight you over the duvet, they want the temperature at a different level. And the thing is, it's only ever poor people who slept together because we didn't have the space. Rich people, go to any stately home in Britain, you'll see the Lord's bedroom, the lady's bedroom. So with my co-author, Jenny Adams from Australia, she wrote a book a few years ago where she had interviewed her friends about sleeping separately. And we met on a HuffPost live program in America, and we've sort of increased it. So it's basically a handbook. It's why you should sleep separately and how to have that conversation with your partner, and how to tell your sort of friends and families about it. Because, there's this there's this whole industry about relationship count. If you sleep separately, it's the end of your relationship. No, it's just a recipe for disaster. As I said, more arguments, more divorces, more marital violence caused by sleeping together. And we've been sold this con of an idea that we have to do it. And it is nonsense. Buy a bed and have it the way you want. And this is one of the pieces of advice that I that's important for menopausal women, is, Jenny Hislop, a sociologist from Surrey and Oxford University, showed that women actually disrupt their sleep for their partner. They'll actually, so a man will always shake a woman awake if she's snoring, but a woman will lie next to a man and put up with his snoring. And this is rooted on the idea that he's the breadwinner, he's a hunter-gatherer, so I will disrupt my sleep for his sleep. And this is prevalent. She published a number of papers on focus groups that she did, as say, in Surrey and Oxford a couple of years ago. And so women will, as I say, they won't toss and turn. They won't, throw the duvet on and off because they think they'll disturb their partner. Well, get rid of him. He's no bloody use to you at this point. Get rid of him and have your own bed, have the bedroom temperature, have the pillows you want, the duvet you want. Then you can toss, turn, get up, wander around, have whatever fans, whatever you want to do, and you're not disturbing another person. So the big thing is that plenty of people sleep separately, but they're not willing to admit to it. And so this is mythologizing this idea we should sleep together, telling you how to have that conversation, and making it easy. So yeah, the book's out. Well, it's actually out now on Amazon. Amazon have their own way of doing things, and they've released it 2 weeks early without telling anybody, which caught us all on the hop. But it is out now on Amazon and other good retailers. But certainly Amazon have got some in stock, and they've even reduced it for us.
Excellent. Buy it now.
Thanks.
Buy it now.
Buy it now.
And my final questions, which I ask all my guests. So this podcast is called Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? So over your career, what have you heard people say that they didn't know before and you've told them? What's the main topic? Well, besides sleep, but main area.
I think really, and this is not dodging the question, but one thing that I found is that people don't want answers; they want affirmation. So people will say to me, "Oh, I've got this sleep problem." And I go, "Yeah," and I go, "Blah blah blah," and I go, "Yeah," and they'll go, "And so I should do this, shouldn't I?" And I say, "Yeah," and they go, "Thanks." And I thought, well, I haven't said anything. You work that out for yourself. I actually didn't say anything. All I've done is just confirmed. So I think what the thing is that people know this. They just need somebody to tell them to do it. And so they've got this knowledge. We all know what we should be doing. And so my role in life is just to say to people, yes, that's common sense, do it. So I think that's it. I think a lot of people don't realise, but when it comes to sleep, they don't realise that they probably know the answer. They just have sort of suppressed it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And what motivates you? So what makes you jump out of bed every morning and continue with your day?
Knowledge, the desire to bust myths. This is what I hate. There are so many people in the sleep field now who have got no qualifications, they've got no experience, they've got no knowledge about the subject, spouting nonsense to the world. And that's what motivates me, that I have to fight against this. I have to tell the truth, make myself unpopular sometimes, go against the zeitgeist, like saying that children should, you should pick them up and love them and whatever. There's enough nonsense in the world and I can't abide it. As I said earlier, I got into this field by accident and it's been my life, and I am going to damn well defend the science and make sure that people aren't ripped off, exploited, conned. So that's what motivates me, the truth, very, very simply, which is why my next book is shaping up to be about 400,000 words long, just to disprove a single fact that has been said. And I have been reading, well, last week I've been reading about Middle Ages German fire regulations in order, and I don't speak German, so in order to prove a point, because as I say, the truth is important. So that's what motivates me. Only in my little field of sleep, maybe.
And what makes you happy, and where is your happy place?
What makes me happy? God, I'm going to sound so dull. Knowledge. I love reading. I cannot. I'm one of these people who will watch a movie on TV and have to have my phone there. I mean, you're watching these old movies on Talking Pictures TV. I have my phone there and I'm looking up actors and what other films they've been in. And then I'll look at what the book is and I'll probably buy the book of the film and read it. And I'm just one of these people who has an absolute thirst for knowledge and an innate curiosity about the world. So I can't just see something and just let it happen. I have to know everything about it, which is why I buy as many non-sleep books as I buy sleep books. I mean, I probably read 2 to 3 books a week, and completely eclectic, but almost all. I can't remember the last time I read a non-fiction book, but so knowledge makes me happy. Finding out things makes me happy. With regard to my happy place, it's going to sound soppy, but wherever my partner is, my partner and I live separately. She lives in Poland, I live here. We don't see each other since COVID happened. We don't see each other as often as we did because of Brexit and COVID and God knows what else has got in the way of life. And so when I'm with her, I make sure that we're as happy as we can be wherever we can be. Usually, she loves climbing in the mountains of Poland, and I don't, but I pretend to do it, and regularly pretend to not have a heart attack whilst walking up these blooming mountains, but it makes her happy. So yeah, I'm wherever she is, I'm happy if I'm with her. That's a
Lovely.
soppy answer, isn't it?
That is a soppy answer.
Sod.
Very final question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Seek wisdom from the wise. It's what I wrote in the front of my PhD thesis. Because there are so many people out there telling you what you should do, what you should eat, where you should go, and all of these sorts of things. And most of them are complete idiots. And if they say it in an authoritative voice or whatever, will get lots of likes on TikTok, people are apt to believe them. And what that does is that it just trivializes what should be important, and we don't listen to experts anymore. We listen to people who are pretty or thin. That seems to be their only qualification. Or you watch a program, the BBC a few years ago did a program about sleep, big program about sleep. I helped develop the program. I wrote some of the script for the program. But because I'm a fat 58-year-old, I didn't get to present it. But who did get to present it? A gynecologist. Because he's good at reading a script and will wear a white lab coat on telly, whereas I would never do that. So we listen to media figures, idiots, pop stars, actors, rather than actually listening to people who have a clue what they're talking about. And that's the saddest thing in the world. That we've forgotten that there are some people who are knowledgeable, experts in their field, and there are a lot of very stupid people who have got a lot more sway on society than they should have, unfortunately.
Oh, I agree with that. Lots of people don't listen to me. I'm only a professor. They listen to a celebrity only. So Neil, I can't believe we actually got through everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was the longest script I'd ever had for one of my podcasts. But there were so many important things I really wanted to discuss with you. We did it. We've been a long time. It's a long podcast. So sorry everyone for making this so long. But we have covered everything. So Neil, I want to thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And please, everyone, read Neil's books.
Thank you very much, Joyce. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.